Hey there folks, I am here with you in my canning room today, and I want to show you how I organize my canning supplies as I head into the canning season every year. So I like to go through my entire canning room, sort, organize, take inventory before the first fresh produce of spring comes on, which for me here where I live is asparagus. So every year I make it my goal to sort everything out before the pickled asparagus comes in to the pantry. So today I'm just going to walk you through the 5 or 6 key things that I do in hopes that it will help you also be prepared for the canning season ahead, so you're not left short of jars or lids, or somehow you're sorting through jars trying to find the right sizes while there's food going on the stove. You get the picture. Preparing helps the entire canning season go that much smoother, and it really doesn't take much time. So come walk with me through my canning room and I'm going to show you what I like to do. The very first thing I do, it's very simple, but I like to collect all of the preserved food from last year into one corner of my canning shelf. None of it's hiding behind empty jars. There's no surprises. And I know as new stuff comes in that this stuff is last year's harvest. It needs to be used up first. So that's just a simple, very simple little thing that I do. All the food is there, and I know the rest of the stuff on the shelves, it's all empty jars. It's a great way to go and a great way to keep things organized as you go into the next season. The next project I tackle in my canning room every single year is always to sort my jars. My empty jars. Now, some people might think that's a little bit OCD, and I promise I'm not. I've just found that when I get into canning season, I don't like digging around in my couple hundred jar collection. I probably have close to 500 jars. I don't want to dig around looking for a smallmouth jar when there's things bubbling over on the kitchen stove, if you know what I mean. So to me, it's very important that things are organized. I can go in, I can pull whatever I need to pull off the shelves, and I know exactly where it is. So I like to go through and I will organize my jars not only according to the size, but also according to the mouth size. So I know where my wide mouth jars are, where my narrow mouth jars are, and then also here in Canada, we actually have an in-between. So I have 3 different jar mouth sizes in my collection. The standard or the small, the gem or the 78 millimeter, and then the wide mouth. And again, this just helps make the process so much simpler. So I'm going to flip the camera around and show you what I have done in the way of sorting things. And hopefully the lighting is good enough for you guys in here so you can actually see what I do. Videoing by yourself isn't always easy, but here we have 1 liter or quart-sized jars, both top and bottom. These are all my Canadian-made gem jars. They all have the same size and mouth. But down here, actually let me just drop the camera down here. Down on the bottom, we have, these are actually all my small mouth 1 liter size jars. So they're all right there. If I need a smallmouth jar, I know exactly where to go. They're all collected in one spot. Once these are gone, I don't have any more. So I know that they're all right there. Now, over on this side, I've got a row of wide mouth jars, and then these are all the rest are my Canadian made jars. Now, sometimes you'll see up top here, I sometimes will mix in my pint or my 500 ml jars to break things up. You can do that however you want, but they're all collected. All my wide mouth pint or 500 ml size jars are here. I've got some narrow mouths down there. So I like to really go through and bunch them up into groups. And actually, that's not all the jars I have. Let me flip the camera around and try to show you my shelf I had built for my really big jars and my really little ones. I'm kneeling here on the ground because I don't know how else to show this to you. But down here, I have the rest of my collection of small mouth pints or the 500 ml jars. And then this whole stack is Canadian made pint 500 ml jars that fit my glass lids actually. So this is a Canadian made jar. They have glass lids that go on them, but they're in between a standard and a wide mouth jar size. So these ones are different. The tin lids I buy won't fit these. So these have their special shelf. So if I'm canning with my glass lids, I know where to go. Up above me here, you see my tiny jars. And then there you see some bigger ones. And if I'll just stand up here, you can see behind me, I've got my really big half-gallon jars. And then these are wide mouth jars that I've set apart for fermenting. This helps so much on preserving day. If I can just pop in here, I know exactly where things are at. I know exactly what mouth size of jar I'm getting. It makes things go so much smoother. So knowing your jars and sorting them is huge. The other beautiful thing about organizing your jars like this, even if it seems a little bit over the top, is that it makes it very easy to count them up when you have to go to buy canning lids. You'll know I have this many, smallmouth jars in this row. It's very easy to go around and tally things up so that you don't run short of canning lids and so that, you don't buy too much of one and not enough of the other. And that brings us to the next thing. People like to know, how do I store canning supplies and how do I store canning lids? So for me, I usually buy them in little boxes of a dozen, and I like to just store them in a cardboard box. Nothing fancy, nothing special, but you can slip your little boxes into there, and it's really easy to keep count in that way. And then this little box just gets stored on the shelf in my canning room, and I can make sure, take my jar count, and then going into the canning season, make sure I have enough lids to fit all my jars. I don't need to worry about running out when I'm in the middle of something. I can have peace of mind knowing I have everything I need right there in that little box. All right, we've talked about collecting all of our preserved food into a corner of the canning shelf. We've talked about sorting our jars according to size, according to mouth size. We've talked about storing canning lids, how I like to do that. But something that a lot of people get frustrated with in canning is dealing with all the canning rings. The canning rings, or some people call them canning bands, but they are necessary for preserving food in jars at home. So some people like to just throw them in a box. That's what I did when I first started canning, but I hated sorting through them and trying to find the wide mouth and the narrow mouth and scrambling through it all on canning day. Finally, when my man and I moved to the mountain cottage, we built our own home here, and we specifically built the canning room. I finally decided that I was going to start hanging my canning bands. Now, like I said, I have jars here with 3 different sizes of mouths. So that means I need 3 different sizes of canning rings. What you see hanging here is simply canning bands strung on an old wire coat hanger. I love this because I can bring it out. I can even hang this on the handle of my kitchen stove when I'm canning. So then I can easily slide off however many canning bands I need. And they just pop right off, just like that. It's a great way to go. I love it. I don't think I'll ever turn back from it just because it's so handy. And then they're on the wall in the canning room when the season is done. They're not in my kitchen and they're out of the way. So if you want to do this, all you have to do is bend your wire to a hook at the end, put a canning band in that so it can't slip off. And then just like that, it will hold the rest of the bands into place. That's all I do, and this has served me very, very well. The bands can dry out if you make sure you put them on the right way so any moisture can drip off of them. They're less likely to rust. And so I love to do it this way. So that kind of wraps up the canning room. Other than, some of you might be wondering about storing your actual canners, whether you have a water bath canner or a pressure canner. And for me, I actually don't keep them in this little room. They live out above my freezer. My man put a shelf there. It's otherwise kind of dead, wasted space. And so I actually store my canners out there. So I can take you out there real briefly, walk you through a few things. The first thing would be that you want to make sure your canners are dry before you store them away, especially if you have a cooler space like I do here. So make sure they're dry. You're going to want to make sure the accompanying rack is with them. And then if you're dealing with a pressure canner, but I also like to store my dial inside the canner just so it doesn't get lost. And then sometimes I will also store miscellaneous things in there, like my jar lifter or a lid lifter. It's kind of self-explanatory, but with a pressure canner, I do be careful to make sure that dial is not bumped because it's very important that that is protected. I find that the key thing though in helping me feel prepared for the canning season is sorting the jars all according to size, all of one size in one area, and all of one mouth size in one area. If you can learn to keep track of how many wide mouth and small mouth jars you have, and then buy your canning lids accordingly before the canning season starts, that really helps things go smoothly. You don't need to worry about, running out of wide mouth canning lids in the middle of preserving. If you have a good inventory of your jars, you'll know exactly what to buy and how much to buy. I actually have a little printable chart that accompanies this video that will help you calculate your jar size, the mouth size, and how many lids you need for a year. So if you're interested in that, I will leave a link to it in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching it on my blog, well then you're going to see access links to it on the blog as well in there. But it's a really handy tool, and it's something I actually don't do every year, but kind of aim for and try to do. I also have a lot of my glass canning lids as well, so I don't necessarily use all of my tin lid jars, as I call them, every year. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So if you want that though, that'd be a great place to go. And I just think that's the key to worry-free canning, is focusing on your jars and on your lids and making sure you have those organized and on hand. All right, folks, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to let me know. I'll get back to you on that. Hopefully this gave you some inspiration to prepare your canning room for canning season, especially the last year or two or three. Canning lids have been harder to come by. So it's definitely important that you prepare ahead of time, because where I live, canning lids sell out really fast. By like August, the shelves are empty and there's no more coming in, even on a normal year. So that is something to think about. It's a great way you can be prepared this year. All right, folks, we'll talk to you later.